Yeah, emerging and frontier economies around the world are under pressure right now. No thanks to a cocktail of headwinds occasioned by higher interest rates, inflation, sovereign debts, and poor local currency value, among others. For frontier African economies, the situation is almost at a knife's edge. Let's bring on Benjamin Boachie, the chief economist at Second Stocks, to walk us through where we are and what lies ahead. Great having you connected to us on our Rise Exchange tonight. Let's hit the ground running. Thank you so much. What impact on emerging markets and frontier markets are you seeing based on the global steady interest rate hikes?
Hi, thanks for having me. We're definitely seeing a sustained headwind from the hiking of interest rates across the globe. Because the entire globe is grappling with inflation at this point, and it certainly applies to Africa. But the most recent data points are starting to suggest that we're starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel, with inflation starting to trend downwards globally. So it's headed in the right direction, hopefully, but there's still a ways to go.
So, do you foresee further deterioration, Benjamin, in the fiscal balance of frontier African economies? What's your short to medium-term view of where things hang right now?
It's a delicate balance, given the prevailing circumstances. You have very restrictive monetary policy, which is what the inflationary environment calls for. So it's critical that you also maintain very stimulative fiscal policy. So that's what I'm looking for. In Ghana, you saw that in Ghana, there was a swing to a trade surplus in the first half of the year. That has a lot to do with the budget that was just read and the stimulative support that we're getting from the IMF. So for the most important thing, I think, is that the countries that have stimulative fiscal policies in this environment will weather the storm well.
What strategies would you recommend to emerging economies, especially in Africa, to balance growth and stability in their economic landscapes? If you look at Nigeria, for example, with the new administration, the move to unify exchange rate, you've seen a very sharp decline in local currency against the dollar. FX inflows is not been so, it's not as swift as coming as expected. Then you just take out the fuel subsidy payments as well, trying to make some very strong fiscal macroeconomic advances, but then there are downsides to this as well.
Right. So I would say the strategies I would recommend are threefold. The first is, as I mentioned earlier, very stimulative fiscal policy, right? Fiscal policy that bolsters output. In Ghana, there was a mid-year budget that was read. It was very sobering because they cut the forecast. But the stimulative focus was on output, and that's precisely where it should be. The second may seem contradictory, but it's fiscal restraint, right? If countries in this environment, especially African nations, are running large deficits, the markets are going to punish them quite severely because in this environment, you do need to show capital restraint, right? And then finally, the third is something that we at Second Stacks, we've written about at length, and that's domestic political risk, right? You want to make sure you do not, as a government, shoot yourself in the foot in this environment. And you've seen that, the defaults in the U.S., in fact, both the defaults in the U.S., the default in Ghana, a lot of them were politics driven. So the most important thing is that right now, politicians in government and in opposition work together. They hold their fire, and they do so because otherwise, it's having very swift and pernicious economic consequences that they want to avoid.
Okay, so, you talk about some of the solutions that's brought to the table, but again, the intra-Africa trade, we need to get intra-Africa capital and investment flows. As I said, Nigeria needs both FDIs and FPIs in quantum leap. Egypt is also struggling as we speak. It's a further devaluation of the Egyptian pound is on the table as inflation, core inflation is about 40%. Look at Kenya, by the way, is trying to tweak its fiscal position under the new administration. So there's a shortage of foreign currency inflows, local currency devaluations out there looking Nigeria in the face, Egypt, as well as Kenya, as well as Ghana. What do you recommend? How do you think we should wade through this?
Well, in the short to medium term, you simply have to continue raising rates, right? The number one thing you want to avoid is a situation where investors' expectations for inflation grow out of control, because that is the number one thing you need to avoid. It can wreak havoc on the economy, and it can be extremely difficult to rein in. So the governments that are doing what they need to do, it's painful medicine, but it's medicine that needs to be taken right now. At Second Stacks, we've also got our primary platform, which allows investors from all over the continent to trade with each other. And it's an important feature, because what it allows is capital from all over the continent to come off the sidelines and enter the economy. And that will help out with the fiscal position of these nations. And because we put these tools in the hands of institutional investors, we expect that it will have a pretty pronounced effect.
So if I'm investing in Africa right now, frontier Africa markets, what should I focus on in order to have a balance, at least a profitable portfolio? What do you advise?
Yeah, definitely lean on your brokers. Right now you don't want to be speculating or taking any inordinate, outsized risk that's not based on solid research and information. Stay diversified as always. That's always the portfolio that you probably want to build, both geographically and with regards to the instruments that you have in your portfolio. But yeah, primarily lean on your brokers. Lean on your brokers, and they will lead you to success.
All right. Interesting time. Thank you so much for those insights. I will wish you a very great weekend out there. Thank you so much, Benjamin Boachie, the Chief Economist at Second Stacks. Thank you so much. Enjoy your weekend. We appreciate that.